Hello, I'm Brendan here from Games, Brains and a Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for short, and it is another episode of Exhumation. We are looking at the specific event, and as always, mixing the facts that we know of with our own opinions and thoughts. This is not a deep dive. I've taken the important elements and put them out on display here. But really, it's as much about how it might have affected Brendan at the time, myself, what's happened since then, and how we feel now. This specific event is when Max Cavalera left Sepultura. So, for those who do not know, Sepultura is a Brazilian heavy metal band from Belo Horizonte. They formed in 1984 by the brothers Max and Igor Cavalera. The band was a major force in the groove metal, thrash metal, death metal genres in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, with their later obviously moving on to experimental influences with alternative, world new, hardcore punk, industrial, and their own country's style of music. So first questions first then, Brendan. When do you remember becoming a fan of Sepultura?
Roots.
Roots, yeah? So
yeah, the Roots album.
96?
Yeah. I was very much through the kind of Nuclear Blast channels. So I think there were these old Drill in the Vein videos, and then there were a few like MTV sort of playthroughs for some of the metal stuff. And I think the first song I properly knew of Sepultura was probably Rat a Hatter. Remember seeing the video for that quite a lot.
You
and then and then I picked up the album, and then I went back. But I never really, I probably went back more in later years than I did at first. I think Roots is such a different sound to previous stuff that when I really enjoyed the album Roots and looked back, I wasn't instantly like, oh yeah, this is amazing. So I kind of stayed in with Roots for a bit, and then I was really with other bands. So I wouldn't say that I became a huge Sepultura fan around the time of Roots. I just liked that album.
Yeah, I pretty much second that. Like with you, I remember Rat a Hatter having regular airplay, and that's kind of what stood out. And being really impressed by obviously the eclectic nature of that track, and obviously quite metal. But I certainly have nothing else beyond that. As similar to later in my life, when it was going back to the likes of KSAD and stuff like that, and hearing the heavier metal side of things. Now, nowadays, some of my favorite tracks come from that era. But certainly not at the time. I basically, put it simply, I would not have called myself a Sepultura fan back then.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange one. I don't know if I've ever been a proper Sepultura fan.
Interesting.
To be honest with you. I mean, that's not to say that I don't like a lot of Max Cavalera era Sepultura and a lot of Derek Green Sepultura.
Yeah.
But, if you kind of weigh it up in terms of like, say how I'm a fan of Metallica or Machine Head or any of these sorts of bands, I know every album. I have every album. I've seen them multiple times on tour. I know, well, I don't, but I was going to say I know what colour eyes they've got. I don't. I was getting a bit too, but you know what I mean? I'm not a super fan like that. You know what I mean? I'm the same as, I know Roots very, very, very well. And I know albums after that, and I know that the albums before that. But even sitting here now, I'm in my head. I'm like, oh, I really like the song Territory, but I can't even remember which one of the previous albums that was on. Do you know what I mean? You get yourself all kind of confused with it. So I'm not a dedicated Sepultura fan. I don't think I ever was.
Yeah.
The only thing I ever remember being dedicated to with Sepultura was practicing drawing the S in the way that they used to do it on my school notepads.
Okay, so then, sticking with Roots then, as that's the point of entry, really. What was it specifically about that appealed to you?
The tribal stuff, to be honest. That was different. I hadn't really heard that. I definitely hadn't heard it, and it wouldn't even been even if I'd listened to their earlier albums, it wasn't anywhere near as prominent. Roots was kind of the change towards that then, and I very much liked that. Which is why I initially very much liked Soulfly as well.
Yeah.
It was really that. It was the kind of groove mix using the sort of samba rhythms and samba beats, and I liked it very much. I've never, even in the Roots days, I've always liked Max's vocals. I've always loved the guitars. There's some great solos, some great riffs and everything like that. But my favorite thing about Sepultura, and my favorite thing about pretty much every band Max Cavalera has ever touched, is often the drumming.
Yep.
to be honest with you. And I think that's probably what captured me with Roots, was just like, you know, especially with like Rrraains being my intro to it. You know, the beats and that are crazy, man. And I loved it. I was like, this is fucking phenomenal. And then to play the album, and then track one is the song Roots Bloody Roots. You know, you're like, oh shit, what's going on here? You know, this is fucking excellent. And when I look back at the album now, the album is not as good an album as I remember it being.
Interesting.
It's a good, very good album, but it's actually quite. I think I could half and half it between really, really good songs and songs I couldn't give a fuck about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now in hindsight, and there are certain songs, as much as I love them live, that I don't ever want to listen to again. I don't particularly want to hear the song "Roots Bloody Roots" again on record.
Fair.
And probably not so much with Brrraains either, and a couple of others, or the one with fucking Jonathan Davis and everyone like that. I can't remember what it's called. Look Away or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, but at the time, I remember loving those songs. I absolutely loved that. And this was also, I guess, that Look Away song. I was very much a big Korn fan around this era. And, you know, so there was a lot of kind of coming together of a lot of things I liked with the whole Sepultura Roots album. But I think I struggled. I think I wanted to be a fan. Does that make sense? I wanted to be, but I wasn't. I remember buying I bought like a special edition, probably would have been a CD at the time, like a digipack, and it's called like The Roots of Sepultura or something like that. And it had like 6 CDs in it, and it was like the whole of the Roots album live, and then all these other songs live, and then alternative versions and B-sides and all sorts of random shit all over it. And I remember buying that and being like, oh, this is gonna be so cool. And then even now, I remember like never really liking it, but telling everyone I loved it.
Oh yeah, of course.
You know, fucking hell. There you go. Spoiler alert. I lied.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, what you're saying is similar to me. It was the unique flavor. For me, I hadn't heard anything with that sort of tribal home country Brazilian style before. So it was naturally going to stand out more than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, although I guess I was well listening to metal by then, I was still finding my feet, you know, a lot. And I think sometimes in that environment, you know, the bands that are getting pushed the most, you kind of feel like you're meant to like. And I kind of have like recollections of feeling like I meant to like Sepultura.
Yes.
I have to like Sepultura. Everybody likes Sepultura. You know.
You must.
I must.
Yeah. Okay, so the story then. In August 1996, Sepultura played on the Castle Donington Monsters of Rock main stage. The band was a 3-piece though, because Andreas Kisser took over lead vocals as Max had left the concert site earlier in the day upon learning of the death of his stepson, Dana Wells, in a car accident. After Dana Wells' funeral had occurred, Max returned and continued to tour with Sepultura. A few months after, the band had a meeting with Max and said they wanted to fire their manager, Gloria Bujnowski, who was Max's wife and Dana's mother. And they wanted to find new management. Now, you can read up many different stories in regards to how this meeting occurred from everyone's perspective, including what was said and how it was put across. The only people who really know are the people that were there at that time. The reasoning was that the rest of the band, was she was given preferential treatment to Max while neglecting the rest of the band. Max, obviously, at this point, still coming to terms with the death of his stepson, felt betrayed by his bandmates, and abruptly quit right there and then. The final performance, Max's final performance with Sepultura, was at Brixton Academy in England on December 16th, 1996. Now, the obvious question is, what did you think when you first heard this story that Max Cavalera had quit Sepultura, and the reasons why? Because the reasons why came out immediately.
I remember a lot of bullshit around the time. And this may be bullshit that was being said, or it may be just my bad memories of it.
Yeah.
But I remember all sorts of things like the Max was being forced. The band were going to kick Max out because he wanted to return home because his stepson had died. Yeah. I remember all the controversy around his death anyway, you know, the conspiracies around murder and whatnot. I'm not even sure if that's a conspiracy or if it's a fact, to be honest. I don't think I cared to a degree, because I had never really got fully on board the train. I knew about it, I was aware of it, but I think that this is again kind of an era of slow news, and you heard things. I think I remember, like, obviously because the last appearance was in London when at Brixton Academy. I remember even hearing that, and I know this now to not be true, but in my memory, I remember hearing or believing that he'd walked off halfway through the show.
I remember that.
Do you know what I mean? And it was just like, no, I can't do this anymore, and left. But apparently none of that ever happened. So I think there was a lot of misinformation being spread. The only things I know, and interestingly that we're recording this now, because I don't know if you saw, but there was an article running on one of the social media metal news sites the other day where very, very recently, in fact, in the last few weeks, Max had actually spoken in an interview about this time.
Really?
And given, I don't know if there's a huge amount more detail to it, but the long and the short of it is that he felt that actually, although maybe people would not have known this because they were very careful to make sure it didn't come through in the music when they played, but that this band had fallen apart a year, 2 years previously.
Right.
They weren't talking, they weren't friends, they had nothing to do with each other. For an hour, they would go out on the stage and they would give it their all and have a great time. And then the rest of the tour, waiting to get to the next performance, was hell. You know, like enemies having to sit beside each other on a bus every day.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess in hindsight, you look at it and, you know, it was obviously, if things got that bad, then it was probably always going to happen. I think one of the other things that Max said was quite interesting in his recent interview was that what they needed, but never thought to do, all they needed was a hiatus. They should have took a year. They should have took a year, gone away, and then come back, and they probably would have been all been fine.
Yeah, particularly following the death, that would have been the perfect moment to say, you know what, let's take this break, go deal with your grief, and then we'll reconnect afterwards.
Yeah, but it's a strange thing because the term I don't understand, or never know, ever know, and I don't even think I'd particularly want to know, is what preferential treatment the rest of the band felt that Max was getting.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, she was his wife, so I don't know, was he getting blowjobs in the studio, or was he getting more money, or was he being, I don't know, allowed to be, I don't know, less available? And you know, it's very difficult to understand what it was that the band felt Max was getting that they weren't.
Yeah, I read some things, like one of the other things I'd heard about it and so on was that Gloria had said that, you know, she would just quit, that Max continue and she would just quit. Like that would solve the problem and so on. But I'm similar to you. I don't really remember a lot about this story because Soulfly came quite quickly after it. Still finding my feet in metal. It was only actually the later years when I understood the schism that had occurred between the Cavalera brothers because of this. Because obviously Igor stayed in Sepultura for many, many years afterwards and they didn't speak. And it wasn't really until, musically, it wasn't until Cavalera Conspiracy. But for quite a long time, that just did not exist. And I read something from Max where when it came to him talking to Igor again, I think Gloria had said to him, it was like, basically, you have a son and your brother's never seen him. And it was like, Max was like, yeah, that's fucked up. And that's where it kind of started from there. And that to me is incredible,
Yeah.
It
is. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to read a little bit because I purposely took some pictures of this, of Max's quotes. And this article ran in Metal Injection, so you can go to Metal Injection and read the full article over there.
Awesome.
So I'm not plagiarizing. But this is essentially a quote from Max. So I'm going to cut away from the beginning bit because it's all the stuff we already know, about Dano and whatnot. So apparently, first of all, he found out when he flew back to America to be with his wife after the death of his stepson, and he found out later that Andreas Kisser's wife tried to move the body, tried to steal Dana's body, and tried to get him buried really quick because they needed us back on tour. I was like, who does that? It seriously made me think about the people I'm making music with, and are these my real friends? Then it got worse because eventually they ganged up, including my brother. I cannot put him out of that thing. He was part of it. It was a mutiny. The three guys against me and against Gloria. They wouldn't even talk to her. That last European tour, it was pure misery. Everything about it was miserable. Of course, it didn't show in the music. The music was great and the shows were great, but the other 23 hours of the day was fucking misery trying to deal with that. He also then goes on to dispute that his wife Gloria was fired.
Right.
So he says that she was never fired as the band manager, her contract ended and she did not renew it. He said Gloria left it up to him if he wanted to continue with the band or not.
Right.
And when he had just chosen not to, she then chose to also not extend her contract. Whether or not she would have had a contract if he left the band or not is another matter, but that's how they felt. He just said, I just couldn't do it because of things like that. There's that kind of stuff going on, really heavy stuff. They had different ideas. One of the main ideas was to replace Gloria and a lot of our crew and people with very professional big people. Now, this is quite telling, I think. And to me, that seems a fucked up thing to do, where the people that helped you get to this size, and now that you're big and successful, we're just gonna, and we can hire anybody, we're gonna basically just go, all right, fuck you, you're done, your shit's done. We're gonna get these successful people in instead. And I didn't agree with that because I thought everything was going good and we were getting booked to all the major festivals. And I thought that was quite interesting because that actually gives a little bit of an insight into, it's only one side of the story,
of course,
but into why they were looking to replace the manager and everything. And actually, from Max's perspective, they were looking to replace the manager, the crew, all the people that had worked with them to get them to the scale they were. Now, to kind of offer both sides of the story, I guess, a little bit, although I'm guessing, it may be that if you wanted to get to a certain size at some point, you may need to change. And actually, there may have been a rift there between the ambitions of the other band members, which maybe surpassed Max's ambition at that time.
Interesting. Yeah, I was thinking that.
You know.
Yeah, it's without the pun, it's effectively Max talking about sticking to your roots, and the rest.
Yeah.
as soon as you were saying it, I was thinking, yeah, was that an ambition thing more than anything else? Like, okay, we've reached the highest level we possibly can, where we're currently at with the people we have, and to push on, we need to do this.
And that's where, again, we're just, all we can do is say what we've heard.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't. You know, it's kind of difficult because I can kind of also see Max's point in it. It's like, but I have the same ambition, but we're reaching that level. We don't need to fuck them all off. We're getting booked for all the major festivals. It's not like Sepultura were a small name and they needed to kick on.
Yeah.
This was all around the Roots era. They were now a huge fucking name. And I guess, I don't know, who knows? Who knows what other influencers are? Who knows what producers are knocking on the door saying, oh, if you sign up with us, we can get you here and there and make you massive. You never know what happened. That one thing that's clear in that is that whatever it was, it started long before Dana's death.
Yeah,
I think. And it was, even though we wouldn't have known it at the time, it was irreparable.
Yeah.
I don't even think that having read all that recently, that a 12-month hiatus probably would have resolved this problem. This sounded like the only thing that could have ever fixed them was to get the fuck away from each other.
Yeah.
And that's
betrayal is the key word that Max was clearly feeling a lot throughout this period.
Yeah, absolutely.
So back then, and even now to a degree, was there a side you ever found yourself leaning towards once the details started to come out and you started to learn a bit more?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But I don't think with any true fair reason. I don't think I would have been intelligent enough to investigate the truth behind stories. All I knew was I was a big fan of Max Cavalera, even if not necessarily a big fan of Sepultura. And that's quite a telling thing for me. And I think that still holds true today because I can often, I don't always like Max's music, but I adore Max.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, my natural inclination is to side with Max because Max is cool and I love Max. You know what I mean? It was that thing. And I wouldn't have known. I would have probably known that his brother Igor was the drummer. I probably wouldn't have even known who Andreas Kisser was, like he would in terms of his name or anything like that. So my affiliation was with the front man.
Yep.
But also then I think just when you go, like, I love the front man and all that, and I don't know what's going on here. I don't really know what's going on. All I know is that his stepson just fucking died, and now he's no longer in the band. I would imagine I probably quite disliked the rest of Sepultura for a period.
Agreed.
Probably completely unfairly, but just in the way that you lean, I suppose, isn't it? I know that it didn't last for long, my dislike of the rest of Sepultura, because the very next album I remember buying and liking quite a bit. So I guess that kind of maybe points towards me not having too deep a feeling either way.
Yeah, not necessarily a loyalty.
Now, I definitely felt, and even now, I think I still feel more sorry for Max than I do, like in the situation, because I don't know if it's true, and I don't know what's true and what's not. But what I do know is true is that his stepson and the son of the manager of the band died, and he must have been going through a fucking shit time. And whatever the reasons for it, his band, because that's the way I thought it was, his band, was no longer his band. All in a short space of time. So even now, when I think it and when I say it like with that such a headline way, without going into any detail, I go, shit, that must have been a sucky couple of years, man.
Yeah, that really is as well. And it's there's no denying this obvious fact as well, is that Max left, joined Soulfly, created Soulfly, and immediately Soulfly were bigger than Sepultura. And there's a strong argument, and I believe it's true, that Sepultura have never been as big as they were back in 1996.
No, I 100% agree with that. I don't even think it can be argued. I think everyone with any logic would. I don't think Sepultura got worse. I think Sepultura changed.
Yeah.
But in terms of their overall scale, their position on festival, anything like that, the highest Sepultura ever peaked, and I think probably ever will peak, was around the Roots era.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they've been certainly around a bit more. What do you make of this kind of schism though in the fan base for those that would turn around and refuse to listen to Sepultura because Max wasn't in it anymore?
I mean, I think they're losing out on some very good music for a start.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit sad that if Igor and Max can resolve their differences, that people can't move on as well. I don't know what Max is like as a person, and whether Max would expect us not to listen to Sepultura or not, or whether he'd be more like, no, by all means, go ahead and listen to him.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of, a little bit of me understands it, because if you're a true loyal Max Cavalera, I adore everything this man does, you may still feel very hurt about all the stuff that happened. I know it's a long time ago now. We are talking, but we are humans, and one thing that humans, if nothing else, are good at is not letting shit go. So yeah, I mean, I don't agree with it. I think it's the wrong thing to do. But I guess at some point Igor got absolved of blame in the fans' mind when Igor and Max became friends and Cavalera Conspiracy happened.
True, yeah. Okay.
Right. So I think the question would always probably be, are you on Andreas's side or on Max's side?
That's it.
That's the problem with Sepultura today. If you had to make that choice, is that if Andreas left the band and they replaced him, which they could never do because he's probably the only true remaining original Sepultura member now, then people would probably find it a lot easier. But I guess back then you were choosing between, it was Igor and Andreas against Max.
Yeah.
And now Igor's not really in it, so it's always Max versus Andreas. And then the two bands, whatever way you look at it, are still those two figureheads.
Yeah. We should continue as well and point out that Derek Green has now been the singer of Sepultura since 1998. So he replaced Max 2 years after he left. What's your thoughts on Derek Green?
I think he is a phenomenal vocalist.
Excellent, yeah.
Absolutely. I think he's a really, really good vocalist. I don't love everything that he's done with Sepultura, although I think they're getting better and better as each year. I think their last two albums are the best of their Derek Green era.
Absolutely, they are.
So yeah, no, I mean, it's a tough call to step into those shoes. I would imagine he had many sleepless nights deciding whether he wanted to take this on, because it wasn't just a simple, oh, do you want to be the vocalist of a band? He will have had to understand and analyze the fallout that may very well happen, the complexity of it all, the difficulty he was going to maybe face from a fan base. So I think he was quite brave to take it on, and I think he's made it his own. I think, I've nothing bad to say about Derek Green. I think he was also the right choice of vocalist, because I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if you read these too, but I saw a list of some of the names of the people that apparently auditioned.
Go on.
And I cannot imagine, I mean, I don't know all of these, but the ones that we do know. So Chuck Billy auditioned.
Testament, all right.
Phil Demmel auditioned.
To be the vocalist.
Be the vocalist of Sepultura.
Fucking hell.
And some people that I don't know, but I saw those two names and I was just like, okay.
Yeah, it might have worked out for the best there.
Yeah.
Talking of which then, considering all of this, considering what we got out of this eventual fallout, so we're talking about the different directions Sepultura went in. We're talking what Max would do with Soulfly and then later with Cavalera and so on. Do you think then, considering, forgetting the shit that went on those years of period of difficulty for all of them, no doubt, do you think it worked out for the best in the end? Because do you part
No.
of me wonders whether Sepultura could have ever, like, would they have continued? It's hard to know. Would they have continued? Would they become one of the biggest bands in the world, or would Max have got bored, like Max often does nowadays, and wanted to do many different things anyway?
Yeah, I was going to say that. It's like I don't know if they would have continued on the way they were forever, because of the fact that Max always seems to want to have 10 other things on the go.
Indeed.
You know, and I think that may have ended up in a different argument where they split at some point anyway, because it would have been like the James Hetfield, Jason Newsted argument, where Andreas is like, no, it's all Sepultura, and Max is like, no, but I want to do 28 other projects. I don't know if they I struggle to think if it had been Sepultura with Max and they'd done another 7 or 8 albums after Roots, that it would still be great music. I can't imagine that they would have had the one thing. I don't want to try not to sound detrimental, but one of the things I think has really benefited Max Cavalera over his career in heavy metal is the fact that he changes, and when he changes, it brings in a whole raft of other musicians and ideas, and it gives him a unique edge. If it had just been 4 members, same thing. How many albums could they churn out before it just started sounding like this is just another Sepultura album? This is nothing different. What are you doing?
Especially, and I'm going to be harsh here, especially these days with the diminishing quality in Max's vocals. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it turned out for the best, but I even say that with a slight pinch of salt, because Soulfly faded from a band I very much enjoyed to a band I kind of don't really care much about at all. Big fan of Cavalera Conspiracy. You know, long may that continue. Some of the other stuff he does are pretty cool, like Killer Be Killed and all that, but that's not a Max Cavalera project. You know, that's
it's a super
just
group.
very, very much a super group. It's not led by him either. You know, it's including them all. And aside from that, Max crops up quite a bit as a special guest on a lot of things, doesn't he? You know, so I don't know. I kind of, and maybe this actually kind of makes sense actually when I look back to how I always saw Max as a unique individual, and I loved Max while not loving Sepultura. But maybe that's what Max is meant to be. Maybe Max is meant to be that kind of ethereal figure popping up on albums all over the place. You know, this kind of little, like a little blessing of Max for this heavy metal release.
Yeah, maybe Max Cavalera.
Maybe him being tied down to one band, one style, when everything would have been detrimental to the heavy metal as a whole.
Interesting. What about your reunion? Is that something you'd ever care to see? The original member? Agreed.
No, I don't really want to see that. I don't think we ever will. For a start, I very much feel that this feud will go for the rest of their lives. But I also don't want to see it. It's so long ago. This is the whole thing. It's not like, you know, Sepultura split recently and it was like 20 albums deep and it's this shocking thing. You know, and everyone missed out on it. A lot of people saw Sepultura, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe there'll be people out there who would be like really cool for it, but I guess I don't really care. I'd much happier going to see a show where we saw Max Cavalera Conspiracy and the new Sepultura play, like separately, than I would say dropping these bands and dropping Derek Green and coming back together for a reunion tour. It doesn't sit right with me for some reason.
No, I actually agree 100% with you. I think both bands do the music, the hits perfectly well, and that's what all you need. You want to hear Max sing Roots, you'll get to hear Max sing Roots. You want to hear Igor hit the drums during Black Mahata, you will get to hear it and stuff like that. And likewise with Sepultura, with Derek Green. But the biggest reason why I don't think a reunion should happen, and I don't want it, is Derek Green deserves better. Just be to decide.
I mean, you know, we've spoken about this before, and I 100% stand by the statement. But Sepultura is Derek Green's band now.
Yes.
You know, the only time that there should ever even be a discussion about Max coming back to have a little sing along or whatever would be if Derek Green decided it. That's the way it should be now. You know, I understand that it's Andreas Kisser's band as well, more so.
Yep.
But if after all these years, Derek Green isn't a key decision maker in the way that band goes, and I think he is, because I think that's why the sound has changed with Sepultura. You know, if Andreas Kisser still saw Derek Green as you're just a replacement vocalist after all this time, then I think Andreas Kisser is more of a dick than I'm thinking. But I don't think that's the case.
No, I agree. You know, we do the dates. Max Cavalera, vocalist of Sepultura for 12 years. Derek Green, vocalist of Sepultura for 23
That's
years.
what I mean. It's Derek Green and Andreas Kisser's band and whoever they happen to have on drums and bass at the time.
Yeah, I don't know who's in the band alongside them.
It's changed quite a bit over time, isn't it?
And last but not least then, because there was one massive benefit out of this fallout, and it was a live album, Under a Pale Grey Sky. The live album, which was that Brixton show, the last one on the 16th. Yeah. And me personally, it is one of my all-time favorite live albums. What about you? Where do you rate it?
I think it's a great live album. Yeah, I do. It's kind of strange that it's so highly regarded, considering how bad everything must have been behind those doors.
Yeah.
I guess to a little degree, because I'm, you know, in a quite a sad, pathetic way, that taints it a little bit for me because of this dream that all my bands love each other, and they go off stage and they cuddle and they all go, "We love metal" together and everything. And actually, what probably happened when they went off stage there is they threw some things at each other and they went sat in separate rooms and refused to talk to each other.
Yeah.
So if I overthink it, it taints it. So you have to try to not overthink it is really the key to it all. And as an album, it's phenomenal. I would have loved to have been at the show, partly, but also, you know, partly because it sounds like it was a phenomenal show, but also because I guess that would have been the last time I could have ever seen it. But then a little bit of me is always like, I don't know, it just feels a bit weird. Like what they were doing out there, they were doing for the love of the music, but they didn't believe in it anymore. You know, it was finished, they were done. And actually what they were really doing was going through the motions, but with them and as much passion as possible. And it's very strange that the album turned out as good as it did.
Yeah.
It should have been shit.
It should have been shit, which I guess is one of the reasons why it's kind of lauded as an iconic live album, because it should have been shit and it isn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. That's our look back at Max Cavalera leaves Sepultura. Got any more information? You want to let us know your own thoughts? Drop them in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?